Welcome to The Forge, a systematic framework for story development. If you're an active architect of narratives, whether in film, marketing, design, or any creative field, this framework will transform how you construct compelling stories. Think of this as your creative blueprint, combining the intentional craft of writing with the structural precision of architectural design. Over the next few slides, we'll explore how to systematically forge stories that resonate, persuade, and endure. We've all experienced it, that moment of brilliant inspiration where ideas seem to flow effortlessly. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Inspiration without a system produces outlines that go nowhere. Look at this divergence timeline. You start with a spike of creative energy, peak A, but without structure, that inspiration scatters into multiple directions, each one diverging further from any coherent path. These become the entries in the graveyard of unfinished outlines, projects that began with genuine excitement but never reached completion. Now, inspiration still matters. It's the necessary fuel. But fuel alone doesn't move you forward. You need an engine, a system to capture that energy and direct it. Notice the compounding progress staircase on the right. That's what happens when you combine inspiration with systematic development. Each level builds on the last, creating momentum that carries you upward. This is the foundation of systemic story development, taking your creative spark and channeling it through a framework that turns inspiration into outcomes. Slide 3 challenges a widespread misconception that story development requires waiting for inspiration to arrive. But the reality is far more empowering. Story development is not waiting for inspiration. It's a set of decisions you can make in order. Think of it like the stamp pressing into the template on this slide. Each decision makes an impression that shapes what comes next. By approaching your narrative as an ordered decision matrix, you move from passive hoping to active creation. You're commencing a system, not chasing a feeling. This transforms storytelling from an unpredictable, inspiration-dependent process into something systematic, repeatable, and entirely within your control. Now let's examine the actual architecture that supports all narrative. The structure of any story rests on 4 fundamental pillars that work together in concert. First, there's the central question, the core inquiry your story is exploring and asking the audience to care about. Second is the character arc, which defines exactly who transforms in your story and how that transformation unfolds. Third is world mechanics, the rules and logic of the world in which your story takes place. And finally, there's the Pact, the emotional promise you're making to your audience about what this experience will be. These aren't abstract concepts. They're concrete questions with real, discoverable answers that you can systematically work toward to build your narrative foundation. Here's where AI becomes indispensable as a creative partner. Artificial intelligence pressure tests the structural integrity of your decisions. It acts as an analytical lens that verifies your logic and validates your narrative arcs. You see those markers: logic check, arc verified. That's AI doing what it does best, ensuring that as your story scales in complexity, the architecture holds weight. But, and this is critical, AI does not write the soul of the story. It doesn't create meaning. Your voice, your thematic intentions, your emotional truth remain entirely yours. AI simply ensures the scaffold is sound enough to carry the weight of what you've built. Once you have a foundational story, the real work begins. The system doesn't just generate a narrative once and declare it done. Instead, it enters a continuous cycle of pressure testing against 4 foundational pillars. First, you can generate new options whenever you feel stuck, expanding the decision tree to explore alternatives you might have missed. Simultaneously, the system tests the logic of character motivations and world rules, hunting for weak points before they undermine the entire structure. It surfaces gaps, those moments where connective tissue is missing and the reader would feel confused or disconnected. And throughout, it maintains continuity. ensuring that the choices you made on page 1 still make sense on page 100. This isn't a single pass. It's an ongoing cycle that continually hardens the story as it evolves, making it more robust, more coherent, and ultimately more compelling. Now we arrive at perhaps the most critical insight, the distinction between the muse and the forge. The muse requires waiting, passively anticipating that mystical spark. But storytelling at scale requires something different. The forge requires systematic action. This matrix maps 4 key contrasts. First, your decision-making. Either you're waiting for inspiration or you're actively making an ordered set of deliberate choices. Second, the nature of the work itself. Passive and volatile versus active, systematic and compounding. Notice that compounding word, each decision builds on the last, creating exponential narrative strength. Third, how you treat obstacles. Do you ignore or fear resistance, or do you use it as a collaborative pressure tester to validate your ideas? And finally, the output. Beautiful fragments and dead outlines, or evolving, continuous, structurally sound story logic. The forge doesn't eliminate the muse. It harnesses her as one tool within a disciplined system. This is how you move from hoping for great stories to building them. Now we arrive at what I call the Crucible Equation. Think of it like blacksmithing. You need the spark of inspiration, that uniquely human creative vision, combined with a system that acts as the bellows, continuously fanning and refining your work. On the left, human inspiration provides the initial creative fire. In the center, the AI feedback loop becomes your engine, iterating and improving. And on the right, you get the finished artifact, a complete story. The critical insight here is that you need both. Inspiration without a system to amplify it remains incomplete. A system without human inspiration produces something hollow and soulless. Together, they forge something real. So here's the final question. Which part of your story development feels like waiting, and which feels like work? As you think about your own process, whether you're outlining, building character arcs, or structuring your acts, I want you to notice which phases leave you feeling passive and which ones energize you. The goal of systematizing story development isn't to remove creativity, it's to eliminate the waiting, the second-guessing, the blank page paralysis. If this approach resonates with you, I'd love to have you join our next session. Just drop the word forge in the comments, and we'll build on these ideas together. Because the best creative systems are the ones we refine collaboratively.